Hello, Southern Festival of Books. Greetings from the underground. At the Caverns in Pelham, Tennessee, we're the home of Bluegrass Underground, subterranean concerts and cave tours. Joseph Campbell wrote about the monomyth, or hero's journey, where time and time again a hero is on a quest and must go into a cave to face his fears, and in doing so recover some treasure that changes him forever. Come visit us at the Caverns, where the cave you fear often holds the treasure you seek.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbie Chadwick, a volunteer for the Southern Festival of Books. Welcome to a conversation with Ruth Ware. I want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the Southern Festival of Books presented by Humanities Tennessee, and some of them are the Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. Links will be posted in the chat so that you can purchase Ruth's book, One by One from Parnassus. And you need to buy this book. Just like past festivals, a portion of the proceeds support the festival to keep it free. So please do purchase your books this way. There will be a donate button also posted in the chat so that you can support the festival with a donation. Make your gift sometime during the festival. I have a few housekeeping items. First, if you are watching this session on Facebook Live or YouTube and want to ask questions, you can download the festival app or visit the streaming site www.humtn.org/SFB. You can also ask questions in the comments page section on Facebook. Be advised that inappropriate comments in the chat will be removed. Thank you for your cooperation. Now on to the important part. First, Ruth will give a talk and a short reading from her newest novel, One by One, and then we'll open the floor for questions. If you post your questions in the chat, I'll get them and share them with her. And then we'll get to them at the end of the session. So here, I want to introduce Ruth. She always wanted to be a writer from the time she was a little girl. And she began seriously writing when she was 7 or 8, writing short stories that soon turned into longer stories that soon turned into novels. For years, she viewed her writing as a hobby and wrote a number of books that she just kept on her computer. And then it wasn't until after she had 2 children that she realized she couldn't keep writing as a hobby and sent one of her books to an agent. Although she got her fair share of rejections, she persevered, and aren't we glad she did? Since then, she's been a full-time writer. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ruth Ware.
Oh, Barbie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. It's such a pleasure.
We're glad to have you.
I'm going to talk a little bit about One by One, tell you a little bit about where the ideas came from, do a really short reading. I always think long readings are a bit of a pain, so I'll just keep it really snappy. And then, as Barbie said, I would love to answer your questions, so please do ask them, otherwise it's going to be a really short event. But to get to the point, One by One, it's my newest book. It came out in the United States early September. It's not out in the UK until November, which is really unusual for me. And it is a locked room mystery. Regular readers of mine will know that I do love a good locked room mystery. But for the first time, it has 2 narrators, Erin and Liz. Erin, it's set in a luxurious chalet in the French Alps in this super exclusive resort called Saint-Antoine. And Erin is the chalet girl. So she's in charge of making all the guests comfortable, making sure everyone has enough to eat and drink, there's enough bedding, everybody's in the right bedrooms, no one's got lost. The chalet for this particular week has been hired by a company called Snoop, who run a music app, which I'll describe a little bit more later. Snoop are a tech company, and the other narrator is Liz, who was a secretary at Snoop way back at the beginning, just when the company was starting up. Because she was there right in the early days, she was given a tiny 2% shareholding in the company, which has become super important because the reason Snoop are here at the chalet for a corporate retreat is to thresh out this huge make or break buyout offer which has been given to the company. So some of the shareholders are going to become millionaires, but others of them don't want to lose control of the company because if they sell out, it will no longer be their company, and they feel they could make more money by hanging on to the company and eventually going public on the stock exchange. So they've come to the chalet to try and thresh out whether they're going to accept this buyout offer or not. And it turns out that the directors are completely split. There's 50% of them are on one side, 50% are on the other, which means that Liz, with her tiny 2% shareholding, has the casting vote. So she's under enormous pressure from both sides. Everybody's trying to persuade her to vote with them. She doesn't know which way to turn. And to kind of put everyone in the sort of mood, they decide to go out for a day of R&R. They're going to do some skiing before they get down to business. While they're out on the slopes, one of the directors of the company disappears. And at first, everyone's kind of just like, oh, you know, maybe she got lost, maybe she skied down into the valley. But then they get back to the chalet and find that she's not back there, and there's an avalanche, at which point bodies start to pile up and it becomes very clear that the disappearance was not an accident and that there's something very sinister going on. So I'm going to read you a tiny snippet. It is from Liz's point of view. And it's, well, you'll see as soon as I begin, it's quite a long way through, but it's just when the avalanche is about to hit. So I'm upstairs in my room, changing out of my skiing clothes when it happens. At first, it's just a noise, and then I feel the ground begin to shake like an earthquake. I turn to look out of the window. I see what looks like a wall of snow coming down the valley towards us, but not a wall. That implies something solid. This is something else, a boiling mass that is air and ice and earth all rolled into one. I scream. I do the only thing I can, even though it's stupid. I fall to my knees with my arms over my head as if that pathetic gesture might protect me. I stay there, shaking, for a long time before I dare to get up, my legs trembling. Did it miss us? Did it stop? From far away, I can hear other voices, shouts, screams, cries. Somehow, I force my legs to work and I stumble out into the corridor. Christ, Topher is shouting. He's running towards the stairs. What the hell just happened? Erin, I hear from below. It's a bellow of fear from a voice I don't recognise, and then I realise it's the chef, Danny, calling for his friend. Erin! The corridor is full of terrified people. There's a smoke alarm going off, shouts of panic. Down in the lobby, the chef is struggling with the front door, which is cracked and bowed beneath the weight of the packed snow pressed up against it. Don't open the door, Topher yells. You'll let the snow in. Danny turns on him. His face is full of fury. My friend is out there, he spits over the scream of the alarm. So if you want to stop me, mate, come and try. He shoves again. The door gives with a shriek of protest, and a mass of snow and ice comes skittering into the lobby. The doorway's still blocked, but Danny climbs up over the bank, sinking into the debris. The last I see of him is his legs as he staggers off into the storm. Oh my God, Miranda is saying. She's holding onto Rick like she's drowning. Oh my God, what if Eva is still out there? There's no answer. I don't think anyone can bring themselves to say what they are thinking, which is that if Eva is still out there, she is dead. She must be. And maybe Erin too. So the inspiration for One by One came about, always my books have like a whole bunch of inspiration from kind of places I've been, people I've talked to, books I've read, things I've loved. And One by One's no exception. But the kind of the core inspiration from it came from the fact that I had written books about toxic friendships and screwed up family dynamics and, romantic relationships and every kind of sort of, screwed up toxic relationship that you could possibly have. But what I realized when I sat down to write this book was that I had never written a book about some of the people that we spend the most time with in our lives, which is our colleagues. And for many of us, not for me now because I work at home, but for lots of people, your colleagues are actually the people that you spend most time with out of anybody in your lives. Often you spend more time with them than with your friends, sometimes more time than with your family. And so they can be really fun, they can be really entertaining, they can, make your life a better place, a more supportive place. Or as anybody who's ever had a bad boss knows, they can make your life absolute hell. And a toxic colleague can just really affect every area of your life. So I decided that I wanted to write a book about the world of work. But I didn't want to just set it in office because I love going to, exotic places and fun places. And the setting for my book is always really important to me because I have to spend a year in this place. So I wanted to be somewhere kind of interesting. And I didn't really feel like, an office in London, however glamorous, would be a place that I would want to spend a year. So I decided I was going to set it on a corporate retreat. And the fantastic thing about that is that a corporate retreat is, in a way, a kind of locked room, because once you're there, you really can't get away. You can't just decide to up and leave halfway through because you're not having a good time. Like, you're there in a professional sense, you have to stick it out. And lines get very blurred during corporate retreats. People drink a bit too much. They say stuff that they probably wouldn't in an office environment. And it just seemed like a really good environment to explore all the kind of pressures and strains of that sort of, work life kind of relationship. And I knew I wanted to explore both sides of the coin in terms of work and colleagues, which is part of the reason why I have two narrators. So Erin, the chalet girl, has an amazing relationship with her colleague Danny, who's the chef, who we met briefly in that extract. And they have each other's backs. They're really supportive. They're really friendly. They're mates as well as good colleagues, but they also kind of keep things on a really professional footing. They're just like a really good example of a great kind of colleague relationship. But on the flip side of that, Snoop is a tech startup company, and it's an app. And I knew I wanted the company in the book to be an app, because I thought, what kind of company could afford to hire a luxurious ski chalet for a week? It's got to be either kind of finance and hedge funds or something in technology. And I don't know very much about hedge funds, so I decided to make it an app. And then I had to sit down and research an app and invent an app, which turns out to be surprisingly hard. And I kept coming up with these ideas for apps, and then I would Google and discover that they already existed or that something very similar was already out there. And eventually, because one of the themes of the book is kind of privacy and the face that we sort of show to the world, I thought I would like an app that has to do with kind of voyeurism and spying on other people. And I came up with this idea, which I still think is a great idea, and I really wish someone would make it into an actual app, of an app that you plug into your Spotify or your Apple Music or whatever, and it makes your listening public. So anybody who knows your username can go online and find out what you are listening to, beat for beat, at any given moment. But the corollary is that in order to snoop on other people, you have to make your own listening public. So it's a kind of quid pro quo. And it could be, you know, your best friend, it could be your boyfriend, it could be your girlfriend, it could be your favorite celebrity, anybody who's on the platform. You can snoop on them and find out what they're listening to. And it's that sort of idea of intimacy, but a safe intimacy. Like, the music we listen to reveals a lot about ourselves, but it doesn't reveal too much. So I felt like this would be a good idea for an app. And I didn't know anything about startup culture. So I read a whole bunch of books, listened to a load of podcasts, read kind of all this stuff about, you know, articles about startups and stuff. And one of the things that I realized is that a huge challenge for startup companies is that to begin a startup, all you need is a great idea for an app, contacts to exploit it, and resources. You know, ideally you need to have some money. But the problem is, once your app is up and running, the skills required to run a company are really different from any of those. You know, you have to be really good with kind of spreadsheets and numbers and people management and hiring and firing and legalese and all the kind of, you know, HR personnel related stuff that goes with running a big company. And not all CEOs are able to make that transition from being someone with a great idea to someone who is a great boss. And, you know, good CEOs do, they educate themselves, they get the skills they need, or they hire people who can do that part of the job for them. But I was interested in deciding what would happen in a company where the CEOs had not done that. So the other side of the coin that I wanted to explore is what happens when a company allows really toxic work practices to build up. And that is what has happened in Snoop. There's lots of really unhealthy things going on in the company. There's people having relationships with people they shouldn't be, with underlings. There's people not treating their PAs very well. There's no kind of chain of responsibility. And you quickly figure out that this is a really fun place to work, but it's also in a lot of ways a really toxic place, which is part of the reason why Liz left many years ago, and part of the reason why she doesn't want to go back. She doesn't have fond memories of this place, and she's never really felt like she fitted in, because the founders of Snoop are kind of, you know, they're really sort of hip people. They're really cool. They've got quite a lot of money. They dress really fashionably and all designer labels. And the people they've hired are like that too. And Liz just doesn't fit that stereotype. So she spent her whole time at Snoop feeling like a fish out of water. Then she left, and now she's been kind of dragged back into this situation that she's incredibly uncomfortable with people that she thought she had put behind her. So yeah, everything is really tense. These people are locked up together. They're not getting on very well. There's lots of tension because of the whole buyout situation. You know, everybody's at loggerheads. And then, just to make matters even worse, I inflict an avalanche on this chalet, which turns it from a kind of a metaphorical locked room situation where, you know, people could leave if they want to, it's just very difficult for them, into a literal locked room situation. At this point, the chalet doors are blocked by a huge snowfall. Nobody can get away. And the events just go from bad to worse. And one of my literary heroines is Agatha Christie. And this book definitely owes a strong debt to And Then There Were None, although it's not a rewrite. The plots are not in any way similar. But one of the things that I think she does brilliantly is that sort of stifled luxury sense. You know, she takes a setting like a dahabeeyah on the Nile, or the Orient Express train, or an exclusive island hotel, somewhere that ought to be amazing. And she turns it into a sort of nightmare, really. You know, it becomes, you have this sort of sense of decaying luxury where things that should be running perfectly are sort of starting to fray at the edges a little bit. The servants aren't quite as correct as they should be because everybody's under stress. And that's exactly what happens in this. You have this super luxurious setting, and as the avalanche descends, the electricity goes off, the food in the fridge starts to go off, they can't hoover because there's no electricity to vacuum anywhere, and the whole chalet just starts to sort of fray a little bit around the edges. And my narrator, Erin, who's the chalet girl, is the person who's in charge of kind of keeping all of this together. And during the avalanche, she breaks her ankle. So she's kind of a lame duck, literally, all the way through the book. But she's a person she's someone who likes sort of helping other people. And she's someone who finds it naturally very easy to kind of to take command. And she's not entirely comfortable with this because she's one of the youngest people there, as chalet girls very often are. You know, they're often only sort of early 20s or sometimes late teens. But she's in this weird sort of situation where she's both subordinate to the guests because she's there to make their life comfortable, but she's also kind of in charge because she and Danny are the resident staff at the chalet, and they, you know, to an extent, what they say goes. And as things start to fall apart, Erin starts to realise that she has to be the one to keep all of this together, because if she doesn't take the kind of the role of responsibility and the role of control, someone else is going to step into that vacuum, and it might be someone who doesn't have the best interests of the party at heart, because the CEOs at Snoop are not they're not necessarily the most responsible people, and Erin is kind of uncomfortably aware that if one of them steps up and starts calling the shots, then things could get nasty very, very quick. I've written Locked Room Mysteries before, but I've never written one that was quite as literally a locked room mystery. And I don't think I've ever written a book that had such a high body count, which, you know, right from the beginning. The book opens with a fictional extract from the BBC News website, which tells you the number of people who die. So you know that from the outset. You don't know who they are, but you know that a large number of people are not going to be walking away from this situation alive. And so it was quite a claustrophobic book to write in some ways. But I wrote it all in 2019. I finished it, I guess it would have been just before Christmas 2019. So long before any of the events in 2020 had even sort of been whispered about. And then I edited it just at the beginning of lockdown, and as lockdown was starting to kind of happen, which was a really weird experience, because, you know, it's one thing being locked in a house in fictional terms. It's quite another when you're literally locked in your house. You can only go out for an hour a day, you know, worrying about toilet roll and homeschooling and all the things that we, you know, found. But somewhat to my surprise, I found that I really enjoyed editing the book. I was kind of slightly dreading it because I sort of thought it was going to be this weird claustrophobic experience. But actually, I found it really cathartic to escape into a world in which things were so much worse. And as I edited it, I kept thinking about the fact that, you know, Agatha Christie wrote all throughout World War II, when, you know, people were being killed left, right and centre, there were bombs dropping, you know, everybody was incredibly unsafe, and yet she produced 12 books, and she was one of the most popular writers throughout World War II. And I think there's something about escaping into a world in which the stakes are so much higher and things are so much worse, but you know at the end of the day there's going to be some sort of restorative justice at the end of it. And I think, you know, my characters often find that in adversity they are braver and more resourceful and more creative than they knew they were, which is maybe what I needed to hear while I was editing that book. But I'm very glad it's coming out now, because I think, this is a perfect winter read, and I think, we're all sort of a little bit more relaxed about stuff now, I hope, anyway. But anyway, I feel like I've been talking for a really long time, so maybe I should stop and answer a few of your questions, and a few of Barb's questions.
We do have some questions. Here's a really good question, and it kind of goes with something that I've been wondering about. What do you write your book from beginning to end, or do you jump from scene to scene and piece it all together? And then at the same time, do you start with an outline? Do you know what's going to happen at the end?
So typically I don't outline. I have on occasion outlined when my publishers have asked me what a book is going to be about, and I've written a few paragraphs just to kind of tell them. I don't outline because, to me, a large part of the fun of writing the book is finding out what happens, and I worry that if I knew that already, it would be a little bit joyless. And also, I think I have to get to know the characters to know what they're going to do. People often ask which comes first, plot or character, and I find that impossible to answer, because plot is character in crime. Crimes only happen because characters commit them, and you have to believe in what that person would do, and believe in who they are, and believe in their motives in order for the plot to feel compelling and convincing. So I have to get to know the characters before I kind of plunge into the sort of meat of the plot. But I do always know who did it, and usually why. Sometimes little aspects of it change, but I almost always know the kind of the whodunit and the method. And for me, I know some writers who don't write that way and who make it work really well. But for me, I think it's really important to play fair with the reader and to give them enough clues that they can solve the mystery. And in this book, I feel like you find out who done it pretty early on, and you probably suspect who did it for quite a long way before that. So the who done it isn't really the question here. It's more the how and the why. And I feel like I have to give my readers a chance to guess that. So I have to put the clues in, and it's really difficult to put the clues in if you don't know what the answer is without sort of going back and editing it all. But in answer to the first part of your question, how I write, I always write chronologically, and I know people who don't. But for me, and I think this is particularly a feature of writing crime, it's so important to know what the reader knows at any one time, because the whole book is a kind of a dance between you and the reader as to who knows what and how much information you've given them and how much they should have been able to guess already. So I feel it would be almost impossible to write a scene from later in the book without having done all of that, because I wouldn't know what I'd already told them and where they were. It's only by I write the way someone would read in exactly the same order. I just do it slightly more slowly. But this book was something of an exception, because it's the first book I've written where I went back and rewrote the beginning. And I'd written about 30,000 words, which is about a third of the book, and something was not working. And I sent the early draft to my agent, and I said, I'm not completely sure about this. And of course, what I was hoping was that she would say, no, it's brilliant, keep going, you're just doubting yourself. But because she's a good agent, what she actually came back was and said, no, you're right, something about this isn't working. And so I kind of took a really deep breath and went back to the drawing board. And what I realized was that I'd started off writing it all from the point of view of Erin, who's the chalet girl, and she just didn't know enough about the inner workings of Snoop. And so she was spending a lot of time kind of listening in at doors and trying to overhear conversations and trying to figure stuff out, which, coming back to my first point, didn't feel in her character. It felt forced, because she wasn't the kind of person who would do that. She would think, it's none of my business, I'll back away. And also, it just wasn't super satisfying, because she was seeing everything. You as the reader were kind of experiencing all of the action at sort of one remove. You weren't in the room, you were outside the room with Erin trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So I thought, okay, I need a second narrator, and it has to be someone who's in Snoop. And Erin was already an outsider to the whole kind of Snoop situation because she's staff, she's not one of the guests who the majority of the people are. So I knew I wanted to pick someone who was an insider, but also another outsider, so that they would have a kind of perspective on Snoop as a company and see these people for who they really were. And so Liz was the obvious other choice because she, although she knows about Snoop, she's been there from day one, she understands what's going on, she's in all of the meetings. In many senses, she's also an outsider. She's not kind of embedded in the company culture, so she sees these people very clearly. So that was the only kind of example I can think of where I went back and inserted scenes in a non-chronological order. I sort of rewrote the whole first third of the book and lost a lot of Erin's material. I had to junk quite a lot, which was a bit sad. It's always a bit tragic seeing your words on the cutting floor. But as soon as I'd done it, I could tell it was a way better book and a much more.
I thought it worked really well. It worked really well.
I had a lot of fun doing, you know, I'd never done two narrators before because I'd always been worried about, I really hate it when I'm reading a book with multiple narrators and I can't tell the difference between the narrators. I end up, you know, flicking back and thinking, who's writing this section and who are they again? And so I'd always kind of shied away from it for that reason. But I found I loved it. And the back and forth between Liz and Erin's scenes, and sometimes, you know, I was able to show a scene from one perspective and say, this is what's happening, and then give the other perspective and say, actually, maybe this is what's happening. You know, maybe that's not what you thought was going on. So that was super fun. I was really glad I did two narrators.
So, you've mentioned Agatha Christie and you've been compared to her. How do you feel about that? What do you think of that comparison?
Oh, I think it's a huge compliment. I mean, I'm not sure that my books are that much like her in terms of the actual writing. I think I grew up reading Christie, and I think she imprinted on me the idea of what a perfect crime novel is in terms of the way the clues are seeded and the kind of how you find out about it and your reaction at the end and that. So I think I strive, don't think I always succeed, but I think I'm trying to give readers the same kind of pleasurable moment of course, that, you know, that Christie does so well, where all the pieces of her complicated plots click into place and you think, how did I not realize that? It's so obvious, you know, all the clues were there. Why did I not put it together? And that's what I'm trying to do with my books. I want the moment where you figure out the killer. I want you to think, oh, of course, you know, it was all there, kind of thing. But I think if Christie read my book, she would probably be very disapproving of my, in general, quite badly behaved young women. She's quite, you know, she's quite stern and takes no prisoners about young people's behaviour. And my characters tend to be, you know, they're a lot more emotional. My books are more thrillers than hers are. You know, hers can sometimes be quite sort of cerebral puzzles, whereas with mine, I hope that as well as giving you a solid whodunit, there's a kind of thriller element as well. You know, it's an exciting read.
That's a great answer. So my personal question is, are you a skier? And have you skied in the French Alps? And why did you choose that? Did you get to go there for research?
So I am a skier in the sense of I can ski. I always feel like if I say I'm a skier, it makes me sound like, you know, I sort of do black runs for breakfast. And I'm a competent skier, I would say. I can get down a run, not a black run, in reasonable style, you know, swoosh neatly in to have a hot chocolate at the foot of the mountain, get on and off a lift without falling over. You know, I'm basically a solid, competent, middle of the road skier. And I do I do ski in the French Alps. I love the Alps. It's one of my favorite places. And so my first book, the narrator is a runner. And I got a lot of comments and emails after I wrote it saying, oh, I can tell you're a runner because you write so well about the pleasures of running. And I am emphatically not a runner. I don't even run for the bus if I can help it. I absolutely hate running and always have done. So it made me feel a little bit of a fraud because I sort of felt like these people were reaching out to me and all I could say was, I really hate running. So this time I thought I'm going to pick a sport that I actually know a little bit about and enjoy. And for me, really, the only sport that I do enjoy is skiing. It's literally the only thing that I love doing. But having chosen it, I found it really easy to write about, you know, a lot of people have said that the book put them off ever trying skiing, and that definitely was not my aim. Skiing is wonderful. You should all try it if you haven't. But it meant that I got a chance to write about both the joys and terrors of skiing. And the resort in the book is fictional. Saint-Antoine doesn't exist, but people who know the French Alps can probably tell that it's sort of loosely based on Val d'Isère and some of its surrounding hamlets. And there's a run at the end of the book, which I won't spoil, but it's a fairly terrifying ski run down a long ravine. And that is based on a real run in Val d'Isère, which I really skied. Some friends took me down it. And normally when you do this run, you can get through a cleft in the rocks to it. But there had been such heavy snowfall that the cleft was kind of completely filled up with snow. So my friends, who are amazing skiers, said, oh, it's fine, we'll just shoot down the side of the hill, it's very easy, it's very deep soft snow. And I got about 3 meters down this hill and realized that it was not easy. And I don't really enjoy off-piste skiing. I don't really do it, and it's a very particular set of skills because the snow's really soft. You have to have really good core strength because it's just so difficult to maneuver your skis in such deep soft snow. And I don't because I don't do it, I don't have those skills. So I got about 3 meters down this virtually vertical slope of like meter deep snow. So I was up to my waist and I thought, I can't do this, but I also can't get back up. And I sort of did it, kind of slid a bit, side slipped a bit. It wasn't really working. I could tell I was about to lose a ski at any moment. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take my skis off and just toboggan down. So I took one ski off and then realized instantly that this was a terrible mistake because I sank about 2 more foot into the snow. And at that point, just completely lost it and fell down this vertical, this like swoosh under the snow, landed at the bottom, cracked my head on a rock, which fortunately I was wearing a helmet. And then the rest of it was this incredibly beautiful ski run, which was, yeah, it's one of the most beautiful ski runs I know. It's really spectacular, but the beginning was pure terror, so that went straight into the book.
Well, I'm one of those that don't ski, and after reading the book, don't want to ski.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It wasn't that terrifying for me, but I realized it was fiction. Okay, so one of the questions we've had from our audience is, which of the novels have you had to do the most research for? And then we have another, we're kind of running, we have about 7 minutes left, so that there's 2 important questions here.
Okay.
And the other is, are you working on another book? So the first one, which one have you done the most research, had to do the most research for?
Well, so I'll answer the second one first because it's a shorter answer. I'm trying to work on another book, but like lots of other authors, I found it just impossible to write in lockdown. I was able to edit, but I don't know, it's like a sort of left brain, right brain thing, and something wasn't working. I just could not create. When I sat down, the words just weren't there. So normally at this time I would be handing in a book, but I don't have a book to hand in. But I'm sort of starting, my imagination is starting to tick again. But I think for a while there was just so much, news and graphs and horrible figures, and then all the political stuff happening as well. It was just too much, and something in my brain short-circuited. So no, I I am working on another book in the sense that I'm thinking about another book, but it's very early stages at the moment. But the other question, which book have I done most research for? I don't know. That I feel like there's almost all of my books, there's some knotty question. The one that I probably did the least research for was The Lying Game, because there's very little kind of technical stuff in that book. Literally the only thing I had to research was some very technical questions about what would happen to a body left in the salt marsh and what you would be able to tell from autopsy at the end of it. But The Death of Mrs. Westaway, I had to completely teach myself tarot reading, which I knew nothing about at the beginning. So that was fun. And at the end of it, I was able to do a pretty competent tarot reading. The Woman in Cabin 10, I had to read up quite a bit on international law, because the whole crux of that book is this weird grey area that ships enter when they go into international waters, and what happens if a crime is committed there. And the ship at that point is not under the jurisdiction of the closest police force, but it's under the jurisdiction of the flag where the ship is registered, which for tax reasons is often these really weird out of the way places, like, you know, the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas. And so you can have a situation where a Finn kills a Swede off the coast of France, and you have to wait 2 weeks while a police officer flies in from Barbados, because that's where the boat is registered. This book was quite high on the research. I don't know. I think probably Mrs. Westaway was the most, just because of the sheer volume of tarot cards and kind of tarot law that I had to teach myself. But this book, I knew nothing about startup culture, and it's quite a specific kind of, it's not just the tech, it's just how people in that industry talk to each other. And I read a bunch of books from people who had started up apps or .com companies. Listened to a lot of podcasts, actually. There's a really amazing one called Startup, which is about the founder of Gimlet Media trying to start up a podcast company. And he comes across as absolutely lovely and really caring employer who really wants things to be good. So I feel he's definitely not the inspiration for Snoop in any way, shape or form, but lots of his dilemmas and the stuff that he was wrestling with helped me to think about what the pitfalls would be for a company like Snoop, and what might happen if they weren't as conscientious as the guy in the podcast was. Yeah.
And then we have 2 minutes. One of our viewers asked, what is your musical genre? Because you did kind of have different genres in the book. What is yours?
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't read the book, because Snoop is such an integral part of the plot, each kind of chapter starts with what the person is listening to on Snoop at that particular time, and how many people are snooping on them or subscribing to their feed. So actually that was another aspect of the research that I had to do, because I am not a very musical person, which is weird given I've written an entire book on the premise of a music app. But I don't really, I mean, I listen to music when, we have people over for dinner, I'll put an album on, or if I'm in the car, I'll put music on Spotify. But I'm not someone who's constantly listening to music on my phone. I listen to podcasts or audiobooks when I'm out walking or whatever. So yeah, that was something I had to research, and I had to get in friends with kids in their teens and 20s and be to them like, is this a cool band? Is this what a cool person would listen to? So my musical genre is solidly 1990s, which was when I was at college and school, and the vast majority of my music collection basically stops at about 1998. And yeah, it's all like, you know, Bowie and the Pixies and Blur and Pulp and all that kind of Britpop, none of which pretty much found its way into the book. There's like the odd Rolling Stones reference, but that's about it.
And those are the only ones that I got. I have no idea who these bands are and what people are listening to, and I just was so engrossed with the book, I couldn't take the time to look up the music. If I read it, which I am going to read it again because there's so much that you miss the first time, I'll probably look up the music so I'll have a better sense of what you've put in there, because I'm sure they're meaningful.
They do. I mean, if you know them, I hope it works either way, basically. If you don't know them, it's fine. It doesn't tell you anything crucial about the character. But if you do know the band, it should hopefully tell you something about the person who's listening to it and what kind of person they are. That was my aim.
Well, thank you for being with us, Ruth. This has been delightful. And I want to encourage every one of you listening to go out and buy this book, because it is so worth it. I'm a library person, but this is a book that I would buy. So thank you so much, Ruth. And hopefully we'll see you at another festival.
Oh, it's been a complete pleasure. Hopefully I can come and see you in person sometime.
We would love that. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.